Waiter insulted Barron Trump in a luxury restaurant. But when he discovered the truth, you won't believe it, the waiter's voice cut through the lively hum of the restaurant like a knife. Do you even know how expensive this place is? He sneered, his gaze fixed on the young man in a simple hoodie and sneakers. Barron Trump looked up from the menu, calm but visibly taken aback. The other diners glanced over, some whispering, others pretending not to notice, but the judgment in the room was palpable. Before we dive into this jaw-dropping story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and stay with us as we uncover the unexpected twist that left everyone speechless. Barron didn't say much. He simply folded his hands on the table, his calm demeanor clashing with the waiter's growing irritation. The man clearly mistook him for someone out of place, maybe a college kid wandering into the wrong part of town. You might want to try the diner down the street, the waiter continued, his smirk widening as a few patrons chuckled. The young Trump stayed quiet, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Disappointment, maybe, or perhaps amusement. I'll stick with this menu, thank you, he replied politely, his tone unshaken. The waiter leaned closer, lowering his voice but not his hostility. Look, kid, I'm trying to save you the embarrassment. We don't serve just anyone here. You'll need more than attitude to pay for a meal in this place. As the tension mounted, the other customers began to murmur, some visibly uncomfortable. One woman even nudged her companion, whispering, "Doesn't he look familiar?" But the waiter didn't seem to notice or care. Barron finally looked up again, his voice as steady as ever. "What makes you think I can't afford it?" he asked, the faintest trace of a smile on his lips. The waiter scoffed. "Kid, I've worked here long enough to know who belongs and who doesn't. And you," he paused, glancing at Barron's sneakers, "you don't?" What happened next was something no one in the restaurant saw coming, and it was about to turn the entire situation on its head. Barron leaned back in his chair, his expression calm but his gaze unwavering as he looked directly at the waiter. "I appreciate your concern," he said, his voice low but firm, "but I'm here to enjoy a meal, just like everyone else." The waiter smirked, shaking his head as if he'd heard it all before. "Sure, kid. Let me guess. You're here to make a point or pull some stunt for TikTok. How about this? I'll bring you some water. On the house." The crowd in the restaurant was now fully tuned in, their whispers growing louder. A man at a nearby table cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the waiter's behavior. "Hey, maybe you should just let him order," he suggested, but the waiter waved him off. Barron didn't flinch. He simply placed the menu on the table and pulled out his phone. For a brief moment, it looked like he was going to record the exchange, but instead, he tapped on the screen a few times and then calmly slid the phone across the table toward the waiter. "Why don't you take a look at that?" Barron said, his tone still polite but carrying a weight that demanded attention. The waiter frowned, his bravado faltering slightly as he glanced at the phone. When he saw the screen, his face drained of color. It was a private reservation confirmation from the restaurant itself, a VIP booking under the Trump name. Not just any Trump, but Barron Trump. The waiter's hands trembled as he set the phone back down, his voice barely above a whisper. You're him?" Barron's smile returned, faint but knowing. "I'm just here for dinner," he replied. "Do you think I can order now, or would you like to continue this?" The room fell into stunned silence. The whispers stopped, replaced by wide-eyed stares and dropped jaws. The once smirking waiter now looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. Before he could stammer out an apology, the manager appeared, clearly alarmed by the commotion. "What's going on here?" the manager demanded, his eyes darting between the waiter and Barron. The waiter opened his mouth to explain, but Barron spoke first. "Nothing really," he said smoothly. "Just a misunderstanding. I think we can move on now." But it wasn't over yet. What Barron did next left everyone in the restaurant completely floored. Barron leaned forward, his calm demeanor now edged with authority. "Actually," he said, glancing at the manager, "before we move on, I think it's important to address how your staff treats people they assume don't belong." The manager's face flushed. "Mr. Trump, I am so sorry for any disrespect. This is unacceptable, and I assure you." Barron held up a hand, silencing him. "I don't need an apology. I need change. What just happened here doesn't only affect me. It happens to people every day who don't have the name or the means to fight back. What are you doing to make sure this doesn't happen again? The entire restaurant was now riveted, every diner leaning in to catch every word. Even the staff had stopped in their tracks, watching the scene unfold. The manager, caught off guard, stammered, We can implement additional training. Ensure sensitivity in." "Good," Barron interrupted, his voice calm but firm. "But training isn't enough. It starts with who you hire and how you hold them accountable. People deserve respect, regardless of what they look like or how they dress." The waiter, who had been silent and pale, finally found his voice. I didn't mean to." "You did," Barron said sharply, his gaze piercing. "And that's the problem. You assumed. You judged. And you acted on it without thinking about the person in front of you." A few diners nodded, their expressions a mix of admiration and agreement. Barron glanced around the room, his voice softening just a touch. "I'm not angry," he said. "But I won't stand by and let behavior like this go unchecked." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black card, placing it on the table. "Here's how we'll fix this," he said, addressing both the manager and the waiter. "I'll pay for everyone's dinner tonight, no exceptions. But in return, I want your word that changes will be made here." The room erupted in gasps, a few diners whispering, "Is he serious?" Others looked around in awe, some even tearing up at the unexpected gesture. The manager, now visibly emotional, nodded quickly. "Absolutely, Mr. Trump. You have my word." Barron stood, adjusting his jacket. "Good. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I'll take my meal to go." But as he turned to leave, someone in the crowd stood up, their voice shaking. "Wait, Mr. Trump," they called out. "You didn't have to do that, but thank you. You reminded us all tonight what kindness and integrity look like." Barron paused, offering a small smile. "Kindness isn't optional," he said. "It's what we owe each other." And with that, he walked out, leaving behind a restaurant full of stunned and inspired people, none more so than the waiter, who was left to reflect on the lesson he'd just learned the hard way. As Barron stepped outside into the cool night air, he felt a sense of satisfaction, not from the attention, but from the opportunity to make a statement. His driver was waiting by the sleek black SUV parked at the curb, but Barron stopped short when he noticed a small crowd gathering just beyond the restaurant's entrance. They weren't paparazzi or reporters, as one might expect. They were regular people, diners from inside the restaurant and a few passers-by who had caught wind of what had transpired. A young boy in a tattered jacket stepped forward, clutching a sketchpad to his chest. He looked up at Barron with wide eyes and a hesitant smile. "Mr. Trump?" he asked quietly. Barron crouched slightly to meet the boy's gaze. "Yes? I heard what you said in there," the boy stammered, his voice trembling with emotion. "And I wanted to say thank you. People like me, we don't get treated very nicely sometimes. But you stood up for us." Barron's expression softened as he reached out to ruffle the boy's hair gently. "What's your name?" "Eli," the boy replied. "I draw sometimes. I'm not very good, but can I see?" Barron interrupted, nodding toward the sketchpad. Eli hesitated, then handed it over. Barron flipped through the pages, his brows raising in surprise. The drawings were raw but full of potential. Scenes of bustling city streets, portraits of people deep in thought, even a sketch of what appeared to be the very restaurant they were standing in front of. "You're talented, Eli," Barron said sincerely. "Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." The boy's face lit up with a grin, but before he could respond, a voice called out from the crowd. "Barron, you've always had everything handed to you. How would you know what it's like to struggle?" The question hung in the air, sharp and accusatory. The crowd fell silent, all eyes on Barron. He turned slowly, his expression calm but his eyes intense. "You're right," he said, his voice steady. "I've been fortunate. But that doesn't mean I'm blind to the struggles of others. It's my responsibility to use what I have to make a difference, not to pretend I understand every hardship, but to do what I can to ease them." The crowd murmured in agreement, and the tension in the air seemed to dissolve. Barron handed the sketchpad back to Eli and placed a crisp bill in the boy's hand. Keep drawing, he said with a small smile. And when you're ready, show the world what you can do. As Barron finally stepped into the SUV, the crowd parted, watching him leave with a mixture of admiration and curiosity. But the night wasn't over yet. What awaited him next would test his resolve and his principles in ways he couldn't have anticipated. The SUV rolled smoothly down the dimly lit streets of the city, the faint hum of the engine filling the quiet. Barron leaned back in his seat, his mind replaying the events of the evening. He thought about the waiter, the manager, and young Eli. Each encounter had been a reminder of the privilege he carried and the responsibility that came with it. Suddenly, his driver, Robert, spoke up, breaking the silence. "Mr. Trump, there's a vehicle following us. Been tailing us since we left the restaurant." Barron straightened, his senses sharpening. "How close?" "Not too close," Robert replied, glancing in the rearview mirror. "But it's been sticking to us for the last mile. Should I lose them?" Barron hesitated. He wasn't unfamiliar with being followed, whether by paparazzi or someone seeking attention, but something about Robert's tone made him uneasy. "No," he said finally. "Take the next turn and slow down. Let's see what they do." Robert nodded, smoothly turning onto a quieter street. The pursuing car followed, its headlights gleaming like watchful eyes in the dark. Barron leaned forward, peering through the tinted rear window. The vehicle, a nondescript black sedan, looked ordinary enough, but its persistence was anything but. "Stay calm," Barron instructed, his voice steady. "Keep driving at a normal speed." As they drove deeper into the residential area, the streets became narrower and more secluded. The sedan's presence loomed, its headlights unwavering. Barron's phone buzzed on the seat beside him. He picked it up and saw an unknown number flashing on the screen. Against his better judgment, he answered. "Hello?" A distorted voice crackled through the speaker. "Mr. Trump, it's a dangerous world out there, even for someone like you." Barron's grip on the phone tightened. "Who is this?" "Just someone who believes in justice," the voice replied, chillingly calm. "You think you can play the hero and walk away unscathed? Not everyone is impressed by your little stunts." The line went dead before Barron could respond. He stared at the phone, his mind racing. Who could it be? A disgruntled former employee of the Trump organization? A political adversary? Or just someone seeking to intimidate him for their own twisted reasons? "Robert," Barron said firmly, "head toward the nearest police station." But before Robert could reply, the sedan accelerated suddenly, cutting in front of their SUV and forcing them to an abrupt stop. Barron braced himself as the SUV jerked to a halt, the seatbelt digging into his chest. The sedan's door opened, and a figure stepped out, a tall man wearing a dark hoodie that obscured his face. He stood motionless for a moment, the tension thick in the air. Then, with deliberate steps, he began walking toward the SUV. Barron's heart pounded, but his expression remained calm. He reached into the console, his fingers brushing against the emergency panic button installed in the vehicle, a precaution he rarely had to use. "Stay in the car, Robert," Barron ordered quietly. "Let's see what he wants." The man stopped a few feet away, his face still hidden in the shadows. He raised his hands slowly, showing they were empty. Then he spoke, his voice muffled but audible. "You think you're untouchable, don't you?" he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "But tonight, I'll show you what it's like to feel powerless." Barron's eyes narrowed, his mind calculating every possible move. This wasn't just a random encounter. Whoever this man was, he had a message, and Barron was determined to uncover the truth. Barron kept his gaze fixed on the man, every instinct on high alert. The words, "feel powerless," echoed in his mind, fueling a mix of curiosity and caution. He noticed subtle details. The man's slightly trembling hands, his uneven breathing, and the hesitation in his movements. Whoever he was, he seemed both determined and nervous, a dangerous combination. "You've got my attention," Barron said calmly, rolling down the window just enough to make his voice heard but keeping a barrier between them. "Now tell me, what's your real issue?" The man stepped closer, his hood still obscuring most of his face. "People like you think you can fix everything with money," he spat. A few kind words, a grand gesture here and there, and suddenly you're the hero. But what about people like me? What about those of us who don't have the luxury of second chances? Barron's eyes softened slightly, though he didn't let his guard down. What happened to you? He asked, his tone steady but empathetic. The man let out a bitter laugh. What happened to me? Life happened. I lost everything. A job, a home, a family, while your kind stayed untouchable, living in a bubble of privilege. And when I asked for help, I was ignored. Forgotten. Barron could hear the raw pain in the man's voice. It wasn't just anger, it was desperation. I don't know your story, Barron said carefully, but I know this. Standing here, blaming me for your pain, isn't going to fix anything. If you want to be heard, you need to tell your story, not use it as a weapon. The man faltered for a moment, as if Barron's words had struck a nerve. But then his hands balled into fists. You don't get it, he said, his voice rising. You'll never get it. At that moment, Robert's voice cut through the tension. Mr. Trump, we should leave. Now. Before Barron could respond, the man reached into his pocket. Robert immediately reached for the dashboard's panic button, ready to alert security, but Barron raised a hand to stop him. The man pulled out a crumpled piece of paper and shoved it against the window. Barron glanced at it, a faded eviction notice. The name at the top was scrawled in black ink, Jason Michaels. This isn't just a piece of paper, Jason said, his voice breaking. This was my life, and no one cared enough to help. Barron studied the notice, his mind piecing together the puzzle. Jason's anger wasn't random. It was rooted in years of systemic failures and neglect. But why target him specifically? I'm sorry for what you've been through, Jason, Barron said sincerely. But I need to understand. Why me? What made you stop my car tonight? Jason hesitated, the anger in his posture giving way to something more vulnerable. Because I saw what you did at the restaurant, he admitted. And for a moment, I thought, maybe you were different. But then I realized, no one's different. People like you just pretend to care. Barron took a deep breath, his mind racing. This wasn't about him. Jason was lashing out because he felt unseen, unheard. Get in the car, Barron said suddenly. Jason froze, his expression shifting from anger to confusion. What? You're angry at the system, and I get that, Barron continued. But standing in the street isn't going to change anything. Let me show you something. Jason hesitated, glancing at the SUV and then back at Barron. Why should I trust you? You don't have to, Barron replied evenly. But if you're serious about making things better, this is your chance. After a long pause, Jason reluctantly opened the back door and slid into the SUV. Robert glanced at Barron in the rearview mirror, his expression wary, but Barron gave a small nod. Where are we going? Jason asked cautiously. You'll see, Barron said, a determined edge in his voice. But if you want to be heard, you need to start by listening. As the SUV pulled away, the city lights cast fleeting shadows across Jason's face. Whatever was about to unfold, it was clear that this night would leave neither of them unchanged. The SUV cruised through the city streets, leaving the chaos of the confrontation behind. The atmosphere inside the car was heavy with silence, broken only by the hum of the engine. Jason shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes darting between Barron and the outside world. Where exactly are we going? Jason asked again, this time with a tinge of unease. Barron turned slightly, meeting Jason's gaze. You wanted to know if I'm different, he said calmly. Now's your chance to find out. Just trust me for a little while longer. They arrived at a dimly lit neighborhood, a stark contrast to the luxury of the restaurant district. The SUV came to a stop in front of an unassuming building. The words Community Outreach and Assistance Program were etched onto a weathered plaque by the door. Jason's brow furrowed. What's this supposed to be? Barron stepped out of the car and gestured for Jason to follow. Inside, the building was modest but warm. Walls were lined with photos of smiling faces, and volunteers bustled about, organizing supplies, answering phones, and speaking with visitors. This is one of the projects I fund, Barron explained. We help people find jobs, housing, legal aid, whatever they need to get back on their feet. Jason scanned the room, his skepticism evident. So, what? You throw money at people and hope for the best? No, Barron said firmly. We work with them, step by step, and if they're willing to meet us halfway, we don't stop until they're on solid ground. One of the volunteers, an older woman with kind eyes, approached. Mr. Trump, she greeted warmly. Good to see you again. Who's your friend? Barron introduced Jason without hesitation. He's someone who needs to see what's possible. The woman smiled and extended her hand. Jason hesitated, but eventually shook it. Come on, Barron urged. Let me show you something. He led Jason to a bulletin board filled with success stories, photos of individuals and families alongside notes of gratitude. Jason's eyes lingered on one picture of a young man holding a set of keys with a wide grin. Beneath it, the caption read, From homelessness to home. Thanks to this program. Jason's voice was quiet. This is real? It's as real as you want it to be, Barron replied. But here's the thing. It's not just about the program. It's about people choosing to fight for something better, even when it feels impossible. Jason looked down at the crumpled eviction notice in his hand, the weight of his frustration starting to lift. I've been so angry for so long, he admitted. It's like, I forgot what hope even feels like. Barron placed a hand on Jason's shoulder. Anger is a powerful thing, Jason, but it only destroys unless you turn it into action. You want change? Be part of it. For the first time, Jason's posture softened. How do I start? Barron smiled. You already have. As they left the building, Jason's demeanor had shifted. The man who had stood in the street, consumed by rage, now walked with a glimmer of determination in his eyes. Why did you do this for me? Jason asked as they reached the car. Because someone has to, Barron said simply. And if I can, why wouldn't I? Jason nodded, his voice steady but grateful. Thank you. Barron's smile was faint but genuine. Don't thank me yet. There's a lot of work to do. As the SUV drove off into the night, Jason looked out the window at the city lights, his mind racing with possibilities he hadn't dared to consider in years. And Barron, sitting quietly beside him, felt a sense of purpose deepen within himself. A reminder that even in the face of doubt and anger, small actions could lead to meaningful change. The night hadn't gone as anyone expected, but it ended with a lesson neither of them would forget. Sometimes, the most unexpected encounters have the power to transform lives.